All right, welcome to CNS Connect webinar series. My name is Amy Smith, and I am the Director of Certifications for the ANA and the BCNS. And today I am joined by Meg Bowman and a panel of guests who are going to discuss the Hours Hustle, designing the SPE experience to fit your life. So I'm going to turn it over to Meg, and she's going to do some introductions.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for having us. I first need to apologize to everybody. If it looks like I'm in a cave, it's because I am in a cave. My office is on the first floor. My husband's office is in the basement. The house next to us is literally getting demolished today. I'm going to have some words with my husband about the lighting in his office because this is very cave-like, and I but let's move forward. So, welcome everybody. I am one of the co-founders of Clinicians Incubator, which is a CNS supervision and test prep organization. And I have my co-founder, Allison Rue, here today. She is going to be managing your questions in the chat. So if at any point you have questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat. And then I have a panel of guests for you here. And some of them already have their CNSs. Some of them literally turned in their paperwork yesterday. And some of them are still working on their hours. So I'm just going to go around the group and invite you each to introduce yourself, tell us where you're at, tell us any areas of specialty, and if there's anything else that you want to share, maybe what school you were from. I think that usually is interesting to people. Why don't we start with Carrie, please?
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Carrie St. Pierre, and I am located in Stamford, Connecticut. I graduated from UB in December of 2021. And right now I'm running a virtual practice from my home. I just signed a lease on an office up the road as well, which is super exciting. But I primarily focus on cardiometabolic diseases. Lifestyle illnesses is another way I hear that said all the time now, as well as functional gastrointestinal disorders and autoimmune cases. And I primarily work with adults.
Absolutely awesome. And Melinda, she's the one who just turned in her paperwork literally yesterday. Why don't you give us an intro?
Hi there, I'm Melinda, and I'm in Bend, Oregon. And yes, I finished yesterday. I am working with people mainly with eating disorders and all of the co-occurring conditions that go along with that, like digestive health. And I'm also a certified personal trainer, so I'm really interested in sports nutrition as well.
Love it, love it, love it. And Dana, would you mind going next?
I am Dana Cruz, and I am still in supervision hours. I am halfway there. I graduated from Northwest College of Health Sciences in May 2021. I'm in Seattle, and I am not picky about my focus right now. I'm just like taking anybody. But ultimately, I would really like to work with grief and nutrition in those particular people who are dealing with grief and how it affects them. And yeah, and I'm just doing my thing.
She absolutely is, and I'm gonna disclose for you. She's got a speaking gig in Australia this summer on grief and nutrition, which is really cool. Cool. Tommy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me on today. I'm Tommy. I'm originally from San Francisco, but I'm now in Hermosa Beach, California, enjoying the beach and the sunshine. Graduated from University of Western States this past December 2022. I kind of letting my specialty find itself, but I have a big background in athletics as a personal trainer and strength coach. So sports nutrition is a passion of mine, as well as functional medicine and mental health.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So I think one of the things that I just wanted to point out today is, my intention with this webinar was not necessarily to come and provide all kinds of ideas about how to get hours. I think a lot of people do that. The thing that I thought might be most impactful is really to talk about how people do this and how they blend it with their own personal lives. Because of course our personal lives don't actually stop when we try and do this SPE thing. So trying to understand that a little bit better is where we're going to focus today. So I would love to start with that, question about how many hours a week, do you typically spend? How does that compare with the amount of time you spent in school? Is there any advice that you'd give to people who are trying to figure out basically how long this is going to take me, when you think about your own journey? And let's just go around. We're going to go in the same order with this question. We'll start again with Carrie.
Hi, so when I graduated in December of 21, I was very tired, to say the least. I really felt like, as much as I did want to just like drive in fifth gear through getting all those hours and sort of rush through it, I also, in the back of my mind, was like, you can't burn out. This is building a practice, all that business development needs to happen alongside of those amassing those clinical hours. So try to take a measured pace. So really what I found was the best pace for me from basically like January, February to, like 9 months, 10 months, 12 months through amassing those clinical hours and taking the CNS exam, was really thinking about a realistic pace of 15 to 20 hours per week of getting those hours on the tracker, and dividing that, the balance of like another 20 hours or so between studying for the test and also business development, because I did not have a website. I did not have my LLC filed. And so, yeah, the realistic pace for me was 15 to 20 hours coming out of school. And it stayed about that until the business really picked up about 9 months or so after I graduated.
Yeah, that's so helpful for you to note that there was a difference in how many hours you got kind of at the beginning versus at the end. It sounds like there was probably more hours at the end as the business picked up. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Melinda, what about you?
Yeah, I think I would echo what Carrie said. I graduated from UWS in, I guess that was December of 21. And coming out of school during the pandemic still, I think I was burnt out as well. So it took a little while to get up to that 20-ish hours a week point. And then, over the last few months when I was really wanting to crank and finish, I was able to bring it up to about 30. But I think that's realistic. I have never been able to do that full 40 hours a week. I've just never managed that. So yeah, I think starting with 15 or 20 hours, and moving up as you progress seems realistic.
Yeah, for sure. And if I can go back, because I know you moved during this, you moved states during this experience. When you had that experience of needing to move, would you just talk us through like how you thought about your hours? What, any thoughts you have around that?
I thought that my hours went on hold. Then life is gonna happen, and when we were selling our house and moving, there were just weeks there when it didn't happen, and that just had to be okay. And I think, you and I talked yesterday in our checkout, like it's just gonna take as long as it takes. And sometimes that's longer than your plan that you had going in. There were other periods of time when I took on too much as far as part-time work. And I realized that after the fact. I think we're going to go into those questions a little bit later, but I don't have children, but I do have the tendency to take on too much. So I know that really impacted some of my hours as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to balance it, I think. It really is. Dana, what about you? What has been your experience about hours? You have a full-time job in research.
Right. So I came out of school in May of 2021, right in the pandemic, and I kind of echo Carrie and Melinda a little bit about being burned out, and then starting my SPEs is like I figured I'd get my hours, 1,000 hours, because I came in from school not having any hours carried over. So I'm starting from scratch. And I worked full time during school, and I still work full time now. So my hours have been slow and steady. I average probably like 25, 30 hours a month. from the very beginning, even with no clients, I was just getting hours just by, trying to, build my website and just do all these things to get the business started. And, so those, 30 hours, I would say was my max a month I could do. So, 10 hours, 5 to 10 hours a week is kind of what I still do now. And, to avoid burnout. So.
Yeah. And I'm sure it was a little bit, it's for many people that are starting their own private practices, it is really difficult when you have those kind of marketing things you need to do, like website build out and whatnot, that don't really provide you hours. And then how do you balance that, which you have to do to get clients, with the, the hours that you need to do to accrue those 1,000? It's a challenge. Yeah, for sure. Tommy, what about you? What was your experience?
Very similar experiences to everyone else. Working full time, doing school full time during the pandemic, hitting that like burnout, frantic, can I keep this pace going kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And then entering the program and doing the SPE, I think the only thing that I would say that might be slightly different is to, give yourself a little bit of grace as you go through it. You're going to have weeks where it's rolling and you get a lot of hours and you feel great. And then you'll have weeks where it is slower. And you have to kind of be creative with, do I take this week and kind of catch my breath and pace myself? Or is this a great time to go to the drawing board and, get creative and find ways to add some hours that might be kind of out of my comfort zone? And look at it that way. The hours will happen as they happen, but there's definitely a challenge of getting creative with, if I'm working full time and that work is separate from building a nutrition practice, how do we leverage that? And I know we're going to get to that later, so I don't want to get ahead, but navigating that process is unique.
It is, it's hard. It's really hard. Thank you for that. Allison, I'm actually going to have you do me a favor and post in the chat the link to the resources page on our website. About halfway down that resources page, there's a calculator that you can use to, put in the number of hours that you need. Some of you may have had hours previously, either through school or through, other supervision. And then it'll allow you to calculate how many hours per week you're working, and it'll give you how many months it will take you, to get it done. It might be a fun tool to play around with here while we talk. So I think the next thing that I really want to talk about is more nuance around how do you make this work with your life. I think the easy button is, well, I was in school, now I'm no longer in school, or I'm about to be done with school, I can just replace those hours that I spent in school with this. But it is different. It's different. And having clients that are messaging you, and suddenly you're responsible to those clients, is a little bit different in terms of how do you balance your workload when it's not a school load where, theoretically you don't, other than maybe group projects, you don't have people that are, counting on you for immediate response. Carrie, what challenges did you have kind of balancing your CNS hours with the rest of your life?
Yeah, it's a great point to sort of think about, when you're in school and you have a little bit of latitude, perhaps with those deadlines. I found that with graduate school, I had a lot more time on the weekend that I was able to devote to what I needed to get done. 35, 40 hours a week of schoolwork is about where I was for those years at UB. And I was able to spread it out over 7 days. Whereas with shifting into work, running the practice, business development, the client work, it felt like it was much more concentrated over those 5 days of the week. So there was like there's this disruption in our schedules here. I have a young child here. And I also had another consulting business that I was running as well. So how did I manage it? It was that I put in place some guardrails that made me feel safe every night, that no matter how intense the client work was or the business development was, that I would really shut it off at 9 p.m. every night. And I wasn't able to do that in graduate school just because that's the way that it was. And it probably was a bit of a mistake for me to not put that in place in graduate school. And it was probably why I was so tired in December of 21. But particularly when you fold in that studying for the CNS exam piece, there really, really has to be this like rule that you make, like Tommy was talking about self-compassion, like, yes, you have to figure out what that number is. I happen to be a lark, so 9 p.m. works for me because then I'm up naturally at 5:30 a.m. But really just honoring that there's got to be something, a point, even if it's not 7 nights a week, 5 or 6 nights a week, where it's like, I'm taking my catalogs, or whatever is mindless for you, and I'm doing this at 9:45 p.m. before I go to bed, and not to be just like totally consumed by all of the crap that you have to do.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's a great challenge to maintain that. I will self-disclose. I got out of school and I was so excited about all this that I literally didn't sleep and I gave myself shingles at 37. You know, from the lack of sleep. So, learn from my mistake. Maybe don't do that. It's a bad choice. Carrie, I actually have a question for you. Can you see the Q&A? It was specifically for you. If you can see that, I'm going to just let you answer. Otherwise, I'll verbally ask it.
Okay, super healthy. I think last.
So if you want to just answer there, that's fine.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Thank you. It was specific to comp exams. Like, how do you balance a comp exam with all of that? That would be helpful. Thank you. So Melinda, let's go to you. I mean, we talked about one major challenge, which was the move. What else do you have to say about how you managed all of this with the family, friends, non-nutrition work, you were teaching? How did you do all this?
Yeah, sometimes not well, and I think just it had to be what it had to be. And I think sometimes you just know that you have to take a full Sunday, Monday off if that's available to you to protect your mental health. There was the point where I'm now TAing for UWS for my school, and I had taken on my first community college teaching job. And I was just like, what am I doing? There was just way too much. So I think that was a learning lesson, and as well as, seeing my clients and my personal training clients. I was able to see a lot of my personal training clients as clients for my SPE. So that really helped. And then as far as just protecting your personal time, I'm just really, really solid about, like Carrie said, about my bedtime and those Sundays that I really, really needed.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that I so frequently see when people come in for an info session. They'll say, "Oh, I'm going to get it done in 6 months," and I go, "Oh, are you going to be okay? Are you going to be okay?" Because we do really, want to get it done so quickly, and that potential for burnout is certainly there. So I appreciate your Sundays. Dana, what about you?
So yeah, during school, I was 7 days a week doing that. I didn't sleep as well as I should have. After graduating, and starting this program, I still go to work 9 to 5 for, 8 hours a day. It doesn't matter. It's usually early. I have learned that I do nutrition work. I do my work Monday through Friday, and I take my weekends off. During school and actually during studying for the CNS exam, my husband didn't know I existed, or I didn't know he existed for all that time. So I really try to now focus on family time and my time, and that's weekends. And so I've stopped feeling guilty about not doing any work on weekends, and that's just works for me. And so I will work through the week to get what needs to be done finished so that I can have my weekends free and not feel guilty. So I've just really a hard stop on weekends now. And my husband is much happier about that.
Finding your
And my
boundaries.
friends.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to self-disclose you, Dana, with your full-time job, when I see you for supervision is 5:30 in the morning, your time. It's 7:30 in the morning, my time. So, that's been interesting to me, especially the people who work. We frequently see them very early in the morning before their job.
It worked perfectly for me.
I don't know how you do it. I wouldn't be there, but bless you. Probably Carrie too. Carrie would have done that. She's an early bird. Tommy, what about you? What challenges have you navigated?
I definitely fell into that stereotype of, oh, it's 1,000 hours. I'll get it done in 6 months. Like, no big deal. And then after the first month, I had to sit down and say, this is not going to happen. So that was the first one. And then I also went from, finishing up school and saying, great, this will be an easy swap. The time I spent, studying for school, I'll flip for this. And I found very quickly that that didn't flow well either. School was very structured. Here's the week, here's your assignment, here are your due dates, and you can just kind of chip away as you go. This has less structure. So for me, I needed to be much more proactive at the beginning of the week, saying, here's what I need to get done this week. Here are, the hours, the key pieces, whatever I wanted to highlight, put them in my calendar, like block out dedicated time for them. And then that way, at the end of the week, I could feel accomplished, like I got done what I intended, as opposed to just kind of flowing through and, okay, whatever I did, I'll make a note of it. It'll go on my tracker and I'll get there at some point. That's at least how it felt in the very beginning. And then being able to switch, being proactive was much more helpful. Like week by week, I can feel like I am substantially chipping away at these hours, but also getting like a lot of material and education in, which also feels really important to balance.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm actually going to stay with you, Tommy, and we're going to go back around the other way.
Let's do
I'd
it.
love to hear if you have thoughts about, like, when did you start? Did you feel like that was an appropriate time to start? And if not, what might you have done?
That's a great question. So I finished school December 2022, had 2 weeks off, and then got right in January. And for me, that was the best. I don't think that may be the case for everyone. I kind of hit that burnout, but also celebratory, oh my gosh, I'm finished kind of feeling, and needed 2 weeks to just turn my brain off and reset. But I also knew that I wanted to keep some of that momentum going, and find some kind of community that had similar beliefs, different beliefs, shared goals that would allow me to kind of collaborate, wrestle, go through those hours in a kind of collaborative fashion similar to school. And I was lucky enough to find that. But for me, that 2 week window was kind of perfect. I feel like if I had taken more time, that ramp up would have been really challenging, and struggling with it.
Yeah, fair, absolutely. Dana, what did you do?
Like Tommy started right away. I think I started the same month that I graduated. I started in the May cohort. So I didn't take any time. And I think that for me because I wanted some direction of coming out of school and how do I do it? So I felt like starting with TCI pointed me, how do you get a business started, while getting hours. And meeting the people in my cohort and supervisors were just really great to be able to bounce information off. And I think it worked perfectly for me. I don't know if I had waited, if I would have found the information that I really wanted, like, how do I do all of this? How do I get this started? So that was the kicking off part for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Melinda, what about you? When did you start?
I started in August of 21, which was about 4 months before I graduated school. So I still was doing my capstone project. And this is some piece or tip that I wish I knew who to thank for this, but I'm so glad that I did that. So I had one supervision session a month with Allison for 4 months. And I had zero expectations about how many hours I was going to get. But doing that, I was just able to get in the groove a little bit ahead of time, do my forms, just some rudimentary basic stuff as getting started and ramping up. And then I started with the full supervision right after I graduated in January.
Yeah, absolutely. Carrie, what about you? Could you I had you address that question in the Q&A, but when did you start in relation to your because you guys had a comp exam and then graduation. How did that go for you?
So the comp exam, the UB comp exam for anyone who's not a UB student, the comp exam is a lot, and it is a 10-hour test. It is sort of like retaking every final in every class that you took, and it's quite intense. And I did that in November of 21, and then found out, about 3 weeks later that I had passed all of them, so I was done in like mid-December of 21. And what I decided to do was to ease into the supervision program. And I don't know if Meg and Allison are still offering starter supervision. Starter supervision is sort of like this nice bridge for people who are just looking to get familiar with the idea of running a practice, what it's like. I think a little bit like Melinda was saying, getting used to some of the backbone infrastructure stuff if you're using Practice Better, how to create your forms, and how to very slowly start collecting maybe 5-10 hours a week of supervision. So I did that from January of 22 until May of 22, where then I went headfirst into the signature experience, which really brought the demands up, the supervision program demands up. And alongside of that, I was also studying for the test. I studied for the test for like about 3 months. Very good timing, because then with the signature supervision at TCI, there is a test prep program. So it all kind of congealed, and it worked for me. Again, I have a young kiddo here. I had some other commitments, and I was really focused on making sure that I have a beautiful website, because I don't do social media. And when I was thinking about business development, is like, listen, the conversation with myself was like, if you don't want to have this vibrant, very updated posting life relationship, like I should at least get the website in a great place. And so I did devote a fair amount of time in those first 6 months out of graduate school to that as well. So
Meg, we've got
Yeah.
a question in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for this question, Andrea. Has everyone here only used TCI as your supervisor, or did you also use others? If so, how many supervisors max did anyone use?
Yeah, I don't actually know the answer to that. I'm going to turn it over to the group. I will say within our program, we have 9 supervisors that you have access to. But did anybody use, I know some of you got hours from school. Did anybody use any other supervision programs or individuals? Not that I'm aware of. No. Okay. Yeah. So it is, most people finish their hours with us. When they don't, typically it's when they want to do an oncology intensive or, something like that, for sure. For sure. And Allison, I'm going to let you answer that one in the chat. Certainly there are hours that are included in supervision. The time with supervisor is included, and you can track that. But I think what I want to turn my attention to for the panel is really that learning curve. I've seen an awful lot of candidates at this point. I'm not gonna self-declare too many, how many, but it's been a lot. And I think the thing that I so frequently say is actually the nutrition piece that you learned in school, that isn't the hard piece for most people. That's not the hard piece. There is a huge learning curve that you get when you get out, which is, how do I take what I've learned and actually apply it with people? And it's an absolutely massive learning curve that I don't think people frequently anticipate. And often the response to that is, oh my gosh, I don't know enough. Oh my gosh, I haven't learned it. I don't know it. What can I, and a lot of people get a very severe freeze response. Like, I can't do it. I can't, and so I'd love to talk and just see how everybody really, if they experience that at all. Maybe you didn't, but how did you deal with that massive learning curve, coming out of school, where you really do know the what and the why, but the how, and especially figuring out how you're going to do it, you don't know immediately. Why don't we do Carrie and that way around? Carrie, Melinda, Dana, and then Tommy.
Yeah, that's such a good question. Because no matter how confident you were in those last semesters at school, those first few clinical interactions are just clunky. It just felt very clunky. I didn't feel like I had my whole backbone built in terms of like, what am I sending to this client? What am I not sending? Like, I know my scope of practice really well, and I know I did really well in graduate school, but everything that it just, there's this like friction, like you can feel that the cogs are not like, oh, it's not a well-oiled machine. And that's all part of these beginning initial clinical interactions. And I think the way I dealt with that most is because I constantly reassured myself that it's okay to be new and feel weird and feel like I had a finance background. So I was in finance for 15 years and my husband's still in finance. And so I had this very intense imposter syndrome going on. Like, no, I'm not a nutritionist. Like, it was so weird to get my business card that said like nutritionist, and I was like, no, I'm a trader. Like, it's all very normal. And I kept really coming back and reassuring myself, like, this is all part of the process. This is all part of the growth. It's going to feel more normal. It's going to be a function of time. And I leaned on my supervisors so much for that, and forming those relationships within my rounds group, people in the supervision program, talking to them, having a bond with them, seeing them eye to eye, listening to, being a listener for them because they needed to be heard just as much as I needed to be heard about how weird this whole transition is. And then retaining some relationships with my graduate school buddies, like in the trenches during the comp exam, like we just were like, this is like the sister and brotherhood where we've got each other, and then continuing to rely on, this shared understanding that it's new, it's weird, we're all in it, we're all going to be okay. Let's hold each other's hands, let's help each other, let's listen, and let's forge ahead sort of together. So community was basically the short answer of how I managed that uncomfortable, clunky transition.
It is. I don't know how else to make, I mean, it is always that. It's just how do you get through it? Melinda, what was your experience?
I've seen a lot of clients prior to grad school in a very different way of nutrition. There was like a lot of rigid macros counting happening in a gym setting. And then I took a long time off while I was in school. So when I came back to seeing clients, it was through a very, very different lens. And that was hard to break through. So one thing I thought of while we were on the panel was just how many opportunities there were to observe sessions of our supervisors. And sometimes I was like, I'm just going to put on my hat and pretend to be a supervisor in these sessions, and now I have a lot more language for how to run the sessions. You'll have time to practice motivational interviewing with your colleagues and go through a lot of that. I thought that was super helpful just as far as a tool and a technique to use that we don't practice in school. So yeah, it is a learning curve, especially if you're practicing in a whole new way.
Yeah, and Dana, for you, this is a big old switch. So what was your experience like?
I was just dumbfounded really when I got out of school. It's just very black and white. I felt like that's what we learned is black and white BMI, every 500 calories less is going to make guarantee a 2.5 pound loss. Right. So, but when I got into TCI and realized that it was definitely an approach that I wanted to incorporate in how I wanted to deal with people, is very, holistic kind of individual approach to nutrition. And I found it was just an amazing way to think about nutrition and to share that with other people. And the community of my cohort and supervisors as well, just kind of like reiterated that, yes, I learned this information and that I can tell it to other people. And the first few clients that I had, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to tell them? And it actually turned out really great that you do know more than you know. And those people don't know much of anything, right? So, I mean, really you can tell them anything within reason and it would be okay. And they're still gaining a benefit from it. And so that was what really made me realize that, yes, I can do this, with the validation from this cohort. And, just knowing I did know my information. So, but it was
Yeah.
definitely a great approach that TCI has, to help people.
Well, I appreciate that. The thing that I frequently say when you are in graduate school and you are a CNS candidate, the people that you hang out with a lot are nutrition professionals. And so there is some imposter syndrome that just comes from that, right? I would never pretend to, know as much as my colleagues who specialize in reproductive and thyroid health. I don't do that. I do mental health and GI. I don't pretend to know that. And hanging out with them, it really does appear like I know nothing about those topics. But when I have a client with those questions, you bet I know a ton more than that client. And so kind of really getting that, level setting check. The last new client I had was a hot minute ago, but they didn't know what protein was. Like that's level setting, right? Tommy, what was your experience with that learning curve that hits?
Yeah, so I have a slightly different experience similar to Melinda's, where I spent the last 10 or 12 years as a personal trainer and a strength coach. And then the final few years getting into holistic life coaching and nutrition coaching. So for me, I've had enough one-on-one client experience where that interaction feels comfortable. But to Carrie's point, that imposter syndrome is real. Like you can't escape it. I look back on my first couple of years as a trainer, being on the gym floor, having a poker face, but deep down inside, I'm like shaking with fear that I'm going to break somebody because I had just finished school. I had all this information, no tools on how to actually use it on a person. You get all this textbook, but how does it look in real life? And I think you just have to wrestle with that and be okay failing and take that as an experience because it's going to be clunky. It's going to be rough. It's a very interesting experience. And then shifting that into a nutrition lens, and some of us have already kind of talked about not knowing enough or feeling as though we can't help our client. One thing that I'll add is when you get into those sessions, your clients know themselves the most, better than anybody else on the planet. Being able to tap into that and meeting them where they're at and helping them on that level is really important. We have so much nutrition knowledge, more than we even realize. But to Meg's point, they may not know what a protein is, or they may be, ravenous at the end of the day, but it's because they're not eating breakfast in the morning. So finding like the simplest piece to meet them where they're at and helping them, to us seems nonchalant. To the client, it is the most amazing way to help them. It is massive. So that whole wrestling of, do I know enough to help people? More than enough. Once you get face to face with a client and you get down to like the nit and gritty, like what makes them tick, what do they need, you'll realize that you've got months and months and months of content to share with them. And then it just becomes pacing yourself and helping them along their journey.
Boy, there was a lot of good pearls in there, I'll tell you. That was a lot of good pearls. Thank you, Tommy. I'm actually going to ask a question that I didn't predict asking today, and you may answer. I'll just have whoever answers that wants to. Here's my question. From the supervisor's perspective, I will tell you, we have a number of months where we as a supervisor team go, okay, they're hitting XYZ months. Like we feel like they're getting it. They're kind of making it internal. They're getting over that initial hump of how do I do this? For us, we usually start talking about it at 4 or 5 months that we start seeing people really kind of figuring out their own clinical signature and how to manage that and transitioning away from these are the school rules to this is how I want to do things. I'd love to know if anybody has a number of months that when they kind of had that exhale and they're like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. enough to feel a little bit comfortable. Does anybody have that number that they'd be willing to share? Everybody's like, no, I don't have that number. Oh, come on, you do. I know you do.
I'll start. And
Please.
so I would say that it wasn't, so again, I did starter from January until May, and then I had my June test. But really like in July, when I started really rolling along for like 2 or 3 more months, and my clinical caseload, my clients were still, it was still a bit all over the place because I was seeing like somebody, my neighbor, the one referral, and it was kind of all patchwork in terms of the cases. But I would say it really was like I came out of UB with 250 hours. Once I got to maybe like about 600 hours total, so an additional 400 hours, I was like, I got this. I got practice better. I know how much tracking I need to see at intake. It felt more, I felt more, not what could be templatized was, and then my sort of like, the wind was sort of in my sails when I was around that 700 hour. And I got my, like you said, your clinical brand signature. That's when I was really like, okay, I know who my people are. I think I had a supervisor say, oh, that's like your people. That's like your people that it's easier now. I was like, oh, light bulb. Okay.
Yeah. And it does get like that. It really does, Carrie. I know immediately who to send to you. Like I know exactly, you really do develop that. Oh yeah, that is the person that's going to match my style. That person, maybe that's not a great match. Send them to somebody else. Excuse me. Did anybody else have a different answer on the amount of time? I'll just take one more. No? Okay, that's fine. No worries. So the next one, I'm gonna do the too long didn't read version. So I want it just a really succinct answer. If there is a single thing you wish you knew coming into this process, or a simple thing that you wish you knew in school planning for this process, what on earth would that be? And let's start with Tommy if we can, and we'll go backwards around.
So mine would simply be, I wish before starting school, I had sat down and had some kind of information as to hours, what counts, what doesn't count, different categories. And if there was a way to earn hours while in school. I did not earn any hours at UWS. I loved the program, completely enjoyed it. But now I have colleagues in the cohort that have 200, 400 hours starting, which is amazing for them. And I wish I just known a little bit more about the who, what, when, where, why before jumping in.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's a great one. Dana, do you have something that you wish you knew?
I guess I wish I knew how that you have to find your own clients, like how best to get clients, and which equates to hours. So, not knowing how it all worked before, I think that was probably the biggest shock, because you can only do your friends and family for so long until you want a real client. And, sometimes they're just one every couple weeks. So, I still kind of am struggling with client load as well. So
yeah, absolutely. That's a great one. And I'm gonna make an answer to that, which is it is so individualized. To Carrie's point from earlier, there are those of us that do not wish to do social media. And there's people who fill their caseloads with social media. So that, that's also a process of finding your own clinical signature, finding the way that you want to do things that is definitely part of this. And it can be a struggle bus for sure. Melinda, what about you? What thing do you wish you knew?
To piggyback on what Dana said, I would think that some sort of networking is going to be part of your process if you are needing to find clients in that kind of program. So you probably already know people that have access to a lot of clients, and just reaching out to those therapists or doctors or gym owners or people that have access already to clients that you know could be really, really helpful. But I do think that I wish I had that mindset that I needed to be actively networking with people that had access to clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Carrie, what about you?
Yeah, so again, the marketing piece, I would have started the more formalized sort of marketing earlier and just spread it out over a longer period of time. So in other words, I would have gotten in touch with the people who designed my website and started writing the copy when I was like between semesters. Like at UB, you get 2 or 3 weeks between semesters. I could have just started laying it out. And I use LinkedIn a lot for because again, my prior industry is finance. So I have this nice network of people and I get a lot of clients through LinkedIn. I should have probably gone back and said to myself, hey, why don't you update the letters at the end of your name, update your skills, because it still looks like you're a derivatives trader. You're not. I probably would have shifted the marketing piece earlier so I didn't feel like the pressure as soon as I got out and got into, finished the CNS exam. It was like, oh my God, I've done nothing. I literally had done zero. I should have done it earlier and I should have asked for help. Ask for help because I know that's not my strong suit at all.
Yeah, and I'm going to self-declare I worked in ad agencies prior to this. Even spending my entire previous career in marketing, man, when it came time to market myself, that's no fun. So it definitely is something that, bouncing off of other people and as much as supervisors can help, it really is something that that is important. I saw there was a question in the chat. Does everyone charge their clients? I'm going to give my answer, which is my answer always. I answered this actually earlier today on an info session, believe it or not. Here's my answer. There's no problem not charging clients, except they have no skin in the game. They have no skin in the game. And these are the people who, they're doing it, generally speaking, to help you out. These are the people that are going to drop off after 1 or 2 sessions. They're never going to do anything that you talk about. I mean, bless them. These, I understand, friends and family. I've been trying to get my folks to change things for years, but it's a battle I've not yet won. From a certain perspective, like actually having some clients where the behavior change piece is really hard is actually beneficial to you because you have to develop your skills as a clinician. But I always tell people, if you are in a position to charge, you should, because frankly, the outcomes are going to be better. And my personal preference is that you charge what you would as a CNS, the $25 per session. Again, there's very little skin in the game, and you will lose your entire caseload if you were charging $25 a session, you get your CNS, and all of a sudden you're charging $150 a session. You'll lose your entire caseload. So just my opinion. I know Allison had a little bit of a different approach that she took. I'm going to go ahead and have her write about that a little bit, if you would, in the chat. That would be great, and we will move on as a panel. But it's such a good question, and obviously you get to do what you want to do. It's my personal experience is charge and charge well, and then you'll get clients that want to do the work. Okay, so I want to get into a very nitty gritty question, which, oh my goodness, we hear so frequently. How did you track your hours? So we all know, of course, that we have to use, there's a tracker that the board provides and we're using the tracker, but great, there's a tracker, that's fine. How do you actually do it? How do you make that part of your workflow? What tools or techniques did you use so that you didn't, I think with one of the things that we see sometimes is that people will go too many days without tracking and then they forget and then they don't get those hours. I'd love to hear your experiences about how you manage that. So we'll start with Tommy and go around.
So I did exactly that in the beginning. I was like, oh yeah, every couple days I'll open up the tracker, I'll put in what I did, and eventually I just forgot what I was doing and couldn't count the hours of work that I had spent. So I am very much a person where if I don't see it, it doesn't happen. If it's not in front of me, it doesn't exist. So one, it's always open on my computer. I never close it. It's always in front of me. And I have a couple monitors, which I'm grateful for. But I also put block time in my calendar at the end of the day, every day. To Carrie's point, like she has a point where she closes the book, it's done, I'm turning my brain off. I do the same thing, but right before I switch my brain off, I'll go through for the day and I'll look at whatever I did for the day and I'll put it into my tracker. And I give myself like a 30 to 60-minute block at the end of the day of just dedicated tracker time. And I'll go through item by item, I'll put it in, and then I can close the day, close the laptop, and just not need to worry or stress or think about it. It's there, it's complete. And that's been really helpful.
Awesome. Dana, what about you?
I agree. I think at the beginning I'd log hours maybe once a week. But now I do keep my tracker open on my computer at all the time. So it's right there. I don't have to search for it anywhere and I can just log it as I do it. So I think seeing it is the best way to remember to do it every time that you're on your computer. So that's basically what I do. I don't log time, like I don't have scheduled time. I just do it right away after I do something.
Yeah. And I think that especially when you have another full-time job, that makes a lot of sense, right? You finish it and you're done for the day. Melinda, what about you?
We started with a very different tracker than we have now. So at the beginning, I was using an app called Toggle, which is a free app that you can track your time. And even now, I do like to go back to that app. So that was an amazing resource. But echoing Dana and Tommy, like I just think keeping that tracker open as much as possible and making your notes directly into the tracker as opposed to transferring things. These last couple of months when I've really been trying to wrap things up, I work in my tracker all day long, you know? So don't let those 15-minute, 20-minute sessions escape you, because you'll realize halfway through your SPE that you were not tracking your time. And I think everybody can relate to this, but there are a lot of little chunks that you will spend throughout the day where you'll just get caught up in something and then that time will not be on the tracker and it's lost forever. So keep that tracker open is my recommendation.
Absolutely. Carrie, what'd you do?
So I kept my tracker open all day, but every day it was at the end of the day, the last thing I did before I got my butt out of this office and left. And I will tell you that making it a priority to not leave your office until there's a few things done is really good practice for prioritizing signing your notes. And I will say that translated that level of sort of compliance with I must get my tracker done as I'm creating this rule, like I'm not leaving this office until my notes with that client are signed. It was definitely a translatable skill. And to Melinda's point, on my tracker, I got to, when I was getting to the end, like I don't know if I was maybe 700 or 800 hours in, I thought to ask one of my supervisors, hey, you know what? I spend 45 minutes 3 times a week reviewing food journals and giving feedback. Can I count that? And they were like, yes, And so if you look at my tracker now, you would probably find a collection of maybe like 50, 60, 70 hours that were just me going through, like I checked on a one line item, like put, 6 names of whoever was tracking that week, their lifestyle or their food or whatever. It all adds up. I think that was Melinda that said those 20-minute, 40 minutes, it all adds up. So that was my other piece of advice. Also with the competencies, do not do what I did and only do like a half hour a week. Make sure you're a little, I should have been more rigid with my competencies. That actually was another regret, because then at the end I had like 10 hours of competencies to do.
Yeah, you get it done though. You get it done.
Yeah,
I will tell you, I will give you my pro tip that I wish had existed back in the day. So there's a tool, it is a paid tool, and the name is very unfortunate. It's called Time Bro. Very unfortunate name. It's a German tool. But I gotta tell you, it's a little Big Brother-ish. The thing watches what you're doing online, and at the end of the day, you have this schedule and it shows you what you were doing by every 5-minute chunk. And then you just go, yes, this is this, this is this, this is this, this is this. As somebody with ADHD, I got to tell you, I would forget, even within a day, if I did it at the end of the day, I would forget those 15-minute chunks. And with TimeBro, you're just like, oh, yes, I did look at that client email for 15 minutes and respond. Yes, I did look at their tracker, the food journal for this time. And it is so easy to do. So if that is affordable for you, TimeBro, love it so much. So we're getting to the end. So I'm going to do a couple things. Allison, I'm going to invite you to please and thank you put the link to book an info session. If anybody would like to learn more about specifically what the SPE might look like for you, please do feel free. You would be booking an info session on my calendar. I'd be delighted to talk you through any questions or what your approach might be to this. Appreciate you greatly. And then I think the last thing that I want to do in the couple minutes we have remaining, it's going to have to be very quickly. If you had any advice for people who are thinking about starting this, not necessarily the what do I wish I knew, but like, what is your one sentence solid piece of advice that you would do or not do? What is that? And we'll start with Carrie. Ah, that's a great face, Carrie.
Yeah. So I would say, whatever you do is to honor if you're filled with self-doubt, if you're filled with I don't knows, find someone who has a friendly face, who's perhaps a year or two ahead of you, and just talk to them. You might have to reach out to a few people. I'll tell you what, if you're listening and you need a buddy, call me. I'm a few years ahead of you. I don't have all the answers, but I have been in your shoes. Just find somebody who wants to hold your story and listen to you and not necessarily mentor you, but just wants to hear you. You're not alone. You're not alone.
Yeah.
You're not alone.
Love that. Thank you so much. Melinda, what about you?
I'd say that you don't need a perfect, well-defined niche to start. You just need to start. Like, you will have so many different types of clients. If you're interested in doing a workshop, just do it with a few people that you know and trust. Just go and try different things and see what sticks. And you don't have to know exactly what area you're going to practice in to start.
Absolutely. It is not uncommon for us to have people come in and saying, I want to do XYZ. And 3 months later they go, oops, nope. Totally normal. Dana, what's your piece of advice for people?
I would just say just start, and like you said, you don't need a website, you don't need to know everything. Just start, ask questions, and ask for help.
Absolutely. And Tommy, last piece of advice.
I would say it's pretty similar. Be mindful of the paralysis by analysis, right? Like, it doesn't need to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers at the beginning. It's going to be clunky. Ask for help. But really, at the end of the day, what your clients walk away with, how they feel walking out of a session, is going to be the most important piece. So if you can bring that each time, everything else will build. The website will come. The flow, the practice will evolve. It will change. It will get to that point where you want it to be. And anyone who's out there practicing has been in your shoes and has struggled along the way and has learned from other people. So I would say, if you're starting, don't wait for everything to be perfect. Just jump in, and it will happen as it goes.
Absolutely. Love it. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Amy, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. So if anybody has any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Or did you all put an email in the chat, Meg?
Allison, would you do that really quickly?
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
So awesome. And if you have questions about hours, you can always feel free to reach out. If you have questions about categories or anything like that, please let me know. I'll put my email in the chat as well. And thank you for all of our panelists. That was wonderful. I think this is the first time we did anything like this. So this was really such a good idea. And I think that the candidates will really enjoy it. So thank you all so much.
Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.